The night my daughter called me, she didn't say hello. She whispered, "Dad, don't call him back. Just come." Then I heard a cabinet slam, a man shout her name, and her phone hit the floor. 9 minutes later, I was standing in her kitchen with blood on my sleeve that wasn't mine. Her husband, Grant, was on the hardwood floor, screaming that I had ruined his life. My daughter, Hannah, was barefoot beside the refrigerator, holding one side of her face and shaking so badly she couldn't speak. The police officer who came through the front door took one look at her and stopped listening to Grant. But the part that still keeps me awake wasn't what happened in that kitchen. It was what my own family said afterward. My sister looked me in the eye and told me, "Don't destroy a marriage over one ugly night." That was the moment I finally understood that sometimes the most dangerous people in a family aren't the ones who hurt you. They're the ones who watch it happen and ask you to keep smiling for the Christmas photo. 3 months earlier, I would have told you my family was complicated but basically decent. I'm Daniel Mercer. I was 64 at the time, a retired high school shop teacher living outside Pittsburgh in a two-story brick house that was much too quiet after my wife Laura died. I taught woodworking and basic construction for 31 years. I wasn't wealthy, important, or intimidating. I was the guy parents called when their teenager needed help building a bookshelf for graduation. I was the neighbor with extension cords, jumper cables, and 3 different kinds of screws organized in labeled coffee cans. I drove a 12-year-old Silverado, wore flannel shirts until the elbows went thin, and spent Saturday mornings at a diner where the waitress started pouring my coffee before I reached the booth. My daughter Hannah used to tease me that I was physically incapable of throwing anything away if it might become useful later. She wasn't wrong. I had a garage full of wood scraps, old hinges, spare cabinet handles, and things Laura had begged me to toss since the Clinton administration. Laura had been gone 9 years by then. Ovarian cancer. 14 months from diagnosis to funeral. There are losses that break loudly, and there are losses that simply remove the sound from your house. Laura was the sound in mine. She sang while loading the dishwasher. She talked to herself while looking for her glasses. She laughed before she reached the funny part of a story. After she died, I learned how loud a refrigerator can seem at midnight. Hannah was 26 then. She was our only child, and she took her mother's death hard, but unlike me, she kept moving toward people. She joined a running group. She changed jobs. She accepted invitations, even when she didn't feel like going. That was where she met Grant Whitmore. Grant was 38 when everything finally fell apart. About 6'1", always freshly trimmed, always wearing a watch expensive enough that he made sure his sleeve never completely covered it. He managed regional sales for a high-end kitchen appliance company, which meant he spent his days convincing people that a refrigerator costing as much as my first pickup truck would improve their lives. He was good at it. Grant could walk into a room full of strangers and make each person feel like he'd been waiting specifically to meet them. When Hannah first brought him to my house, he showed up with bourbon for me, even though I had never told him I drank bourbon, flowers for Hannah, and an expensive candle because he said a home should smell like somebody cares about it. Laura would have laughed at that. I liked him anyway. More importantly, Hannah liked herself around him. She laughed more. She bought new dresses. She started talking about traveling again. After watching grief dim her for years, I wanted to believe Grant was the reason the light had returned. So when little things bothered me, I ignored them. Grant corrected people constantly. Restaurants, waiters, cashiers, Hannah, me. He liked being right more than he liked conversations. If Hannah told a story, Grant often jumped in halfway through. That's not exactly what happened. If she said they had arrived somewhere at 7, he'd say, "It was 7:12. If she said she liked a movie, he'd explain why the reviews said it wasn't good. At first, I found it annoying. Later, I realized it served another purpose. He was training her to doubt herself. The first Thanksgiving after they married, I saw the change clearly. Thanksgiving had always belonged to Laura. Even after she died, Hannah and I tried to keep her traditions alive. Cornbread stuffing with too much sage, green beans with bacon, sweet potatoes with brown sugar, and a pecan pie Hannah never quite managed to make without cracking the top. That year, Hannah offered to host at the house she and Grant had bought in Cranberry Township. Grant's parents were there, his younger brother, 2 cousins, my sister Janet and her husband, and several relatives who mostly appeared when somebody was serving free food. Hannah had been cooking since 6 that morning. I knew because she texted me a photo of flour all over her shirt with the caption, "Mom would be judging me." When we sat down, everybody praised the table. Grant poured wine and smiled like he had personally grown the turkey. About 10 minutes into dinner, Hannah reached across him for the gravy. Grant looked at her plate and said, "Seriously?" She froze. "What?" "That's your second helping." Hannah laughed awkwardly. "It's Thanksgiving." Grant patted his stomach and said, "I'm just saying we have Christmas pictures next month." His mother, Susan, actually laughed. "He's trying to keep you honest, sweetheart." A couple other people chuckled because that's what families do when something uncomfortable happens. They laugh so nobody has to admit they heard it. Hannah slowly put the gravy back. I remember staring at Grant and thinking I should say something. I almost did. Then Hannah caught my eye and shook her head slightly. So I stayed quiet. That silence bothered me later. A lot of my mistakes with Hannah didn't come from things I did. They came from moments when I convinced myself doing nothing was the mature choice. After dinner, I found her alone in the pantry, pretending to reorganize canned cranberry sauce. "You okay?" I asked. "Fine." "Hannah!" She smiled too quickly. "Dad, please don't start anything." That became a phrase I heard more and more. Please don't start anything. Please don't take it personally. Please just let it go. Translation: Grant will punish me later if you embarrass him now. I didn't understand that yet. By Christmas, Grant had become the unofficial director of every family gathering. He decided what time people arrived, where we ate, what gifts were appropriate, and apparently who belonged in photographs. I learned that last part when Susan posted 23 pictures from their Christmas brunch on Facebook. There were photos of Grant pouring mimosas, Grant with his brother, Grant's parents beside their 12-foot tree, Hannah holding Susan's dog, cousins wearing matching pajamas, even a picture of the charcuterie board. I was there for 4 hours. I wasn't in a single photo. At first, I laughed about it. Then Hannah called me 2 days later and apologized. "Grant thinks you always look uncomfortable in pictures." "I am uncomfortable in pictures." "I know." She went quiet, but that's not why. I waited. "He says you don't fit the aesthetic." I thought she was joking. She wasn't. "What aesthetic, Dad?" She sounded exhausted. "Forget it. I did. Or I tried to." The Whitmores were the kind of family that treated social media like a second living room, except everyone in that living room had perfect lighting and nobody fought. Susan posted captions about gratitude, loyalty, Sunday dinners, and protecting family at all costs. In real life, she could cut someone apart with 6 words and finish arranging flowers before they realized they were bleeding. Robert, Grant's father, rarely challenged her. Grant's brother Chase copied Grant's opinions the way younger brothers sometimes do. Hannah became the person expected to adapt to all of them. Ironically, I was still useful. Grant called when he needed shelves built in the garage. Susan asked me to repair a loose porch railing. Robert needed help replacing warped boards on his deck. Chase borrowed my pressure washer and kept it for 8 months. I didn't mind helping. That was how I understood family. Laura used to say acts of service were my love language before either of us knew what a love language was. But eventually I noticed something. They always remembered I was family when something was broken. They forgot when something was being celebrated. One Saturday in March, I spent 7 hours helping Grant finish built-in cabinets in his basement. He had been bragging for months about turning the space into a whiskey lounge, which sounded to me like a basement with bottles. But apparently that wasn't sophisticated enough. Hannah kept coming downstairs asking if we wanted sandwiches. Every time she did, Grant gave her another task. Bring ice, find the level, move the boxes, get different glasses. At one point, she handed him the wrong drill bit. He stared at it and said, "Do you ever actually listen?" Hannah immediately apologized. Something in her voice made me look up. It wasn't irritation, it was fear. Grant saw me watching and smiled. "She lives in her own little world." "Looks like she brought what you asked for," I said. His smile tightened. "No, I asked for the 3/8." I held out my hand. "That is 3/8." Grant looked down. For maybe 2 seconds, no one spoke. Then he laughed. "Well, look at that. Guess I'm the idiot." Hannah didn't laugh. Neither did I. Later, while Grant went upstairs, Hannah helped me carry scrap wood to the truck. When she reached for a board, her sleeve slid up. There were 3 dark bruises around her upper arm, finger-shaped. I stopped moving. "What happened?" She jerked the sleeve down immediately. "Nothing." "Those aren't nothing." I bumped into the closet door. 3 times? Her face changed. "Not much, Just enough. Dad, please. There it was again. I lowered my voice. Did Grant do that? No. Too fast. Henna. He grabbed me during an argument. That's all. That's not all. He didn't hit me. The fact that she offered that sentence as reassurance made my stomach turn. Has he ever hit you? No. She looked away. He just gets intense sometimes. Intense. He stressed. Hannah, please stop. Tears had appeared in her eyes, and I realized pushing harder would make her defend him harder. So I took a breath. Okay. She looked surprised. Okay. I'm not going to interrogate you in the driveway. I put the board down. But I need you to hear one thing. She waited. There is no version of marriage where being afraid of your husband is normal. Her mouth tightened. I'm not afraid of him. I nodded toward her sleeve. Then why are you whispering? She didn't answer. Grant opened the back door and called her name. Hannah nearly jumped. That was the moment I knew. Maybe not how bad it was. Maybe not how long it had been happening. But I knew. For the next several weeks, I tried to stay close without making Hannah feel watched. I called more, invited her to breakfast, sent stupid pictures of the neighbor's cat sleeping in my flower pots. When she canceled plans, I didn't guilt her. When she answered, I listened. Grant noticed. Men who depend on isolation always notice when somebody starts opening a door. He began making jokes about me. At a family barbecue in May, he told everyone Hannah and I had an unhealthy father-daughter attachment. Susan smiled over her wine and said, some parents have trouble letting married children grow up. Janet, my own sister, nodded. That one hurt. Janet had known Hannah since the day she was born. She held her in the hospital. She bought her first bicycle. But Janet also loved peace more than truth. She would forgive almost anything if confronting it might ruin dessert. Daniel does worry too much, she said. I looked at Hannah. She stared at her plate. Grant leaned back, satisfied. See, it's not just me. Later, Janet cornered me near the garage. You need to give them space. Did Hannah tell you that? No, but I can see what's happening. What's happening? She sighed as if I were exhausting. You don't like Grant, and Hannah feels caught in the middle. I don't like the bruises on her arm. Janet went still. Then came the sentence I will never forget. Couples grab each other sometimes. I stared at her. She immediately softened her voice. I'm not saying it's good. I'm saying marriages are messy. You and Laura fought. Laura never flinched when I walked into her room. Janet looked away. Just don't blow things up unless Hannah asks you to. So I didn't blow anything up. I did something more useful. I made sure Hannah knew she had somewhere to go. I cleaned out her old bedroom without telling her why. I replaced the mattress, fixed the window that always stuck in humid weather, and put fresh towels in the bathroom. I left the ceramic lamp Laura bought her when she was 12. I even found an old photograph of Hannah and her mother baking Christmas cookies and put it in the top drawer instead of on display. I didn't want the room to feel like a trap from the past. I wanted it to feel like a door. Then I gave Hannah a house key. She frowned. I already have one. That one's old. I changed the back lock last year. Why? Because it was sticking. She studied my face. Dad, keep it on your key ring. She understood. Neither of us said anything else. The abuse didn't explode immediately. That's the cruel part. People who haven't lived around it don't understand. There were good weeks. Grant sent flowers to Hannah's office. He took her to a concert. Susan posted photos of them at a rooftop restaurant with the caption, "These two prove true love always wins." Hannah looked beautiful in those pictures. She also looked tired. Then came another argument, another apology, another expensive dinner, another quiet week. The cycle was so polished that even Hannah sometimes convinced herself it wasn't abuse. Then her cousin Melissa announced her wedding. Hannah had grown up with Melissa. They spent summers sleeping on each other's bedroom floors. Hannah assumed she'd be invited. Instead, the invitation came addressed only to me. I thought it was a mistake. Then Hannah called crying. Melissa had messaged her privately. I hope you understand, but Grant is helping with some vendor connections, and there's already so much tension. Mom thinks it's better if you sit this one out. Hannah read the message to me twice because she couldn't believe it. They invited him? I asked. Yes. But not you? Melissa says she doesn't want drama. I felt something dark move through my chest. You're the one being hurt, and they're excluding you so the man hurting you feels comfortable. Hannah wiped her face. She doesn't know everything. She knows enough. Dad, don't call her. I'm not calling anybody. Promise? Promise. Then I did something I had rarely done in my life. I declined the invitation without explanation. Janet called within an hour. You can't skip Melissa's wedding. Watch me. Daniel, this is childish. My daughter wasn't invited. Because Melissa doesn't want Grant and Hannah fighting at her wedding. Grant is invited. Silence. Janet lowered her voice. You know how complicated this has gotten? No, Janet. It's actually becoming very simple. Daniel, you're asking the wrong person to disappear. Then I hung up. That was the first real boundary I set, and the reaction told me how necessary it was. Susan sent me a long message about not forcing people to take sides. Robert called and said Grant felt attacked. Chase posted some vague nonsense online about older people interfering in marriages they didn't understand. Janet told relatives I was becoming bitter since Laura's death. Nobody asked about Hannah's bruises. Everybody had an opinion about my attitude. That summer, Hannah became smaller. Not physically, exactly. Emotionally. She stopped wearing bright clothes because Grant said they drew attention. She stopped seeing one of her college friends because Grant thought the friend was anti-marriage. She changed gyms because Grant didn't like one of the male trainers. She asked permission without realizing she was asking permission. Do you think Grant would mind if I stayed another hour? Grant says we should leave by 9. I need to check with Grant. I hated hearing his name attached to every decision, but I had learned enough not to say, just leave him. People think that sentence is a rescue rope. Sometimes it feels like another person ordering you around. So I asked different questions. What do you want? Do you feel safe? What would make tonight easier? At first, Hannah had no answers. Slowly, she started finding them. Then came the night everything broke. It was early September, warm enough that I had my kitchen windows open. I had eaten leftover meatloaf and was half asleep watching a Pirates game when my phone rang at 10:47. Hannah, I answered. Hey, kiddo, nothing. Then breathing. Hannah? She whispered. Dad, don't call him back. Just come. My body went cold. Are you hurt? A crash exploded through the phone. Grant's voice followed. Who are you calling? Hannah said my name once. Then the phone hit something hard. The line stayed connected. I heard Grant yelling, Hannah crying, another crash. I was already moving. I called 911 from my second phone while pulling on shoes. I gave the dispatcher the address, told her I believed my daughter was being assaulted, and got in my truck. I didn't drive like a movie hero. I didn't run red lights or fantasize about breaking Grant's jaw. I remember that clearly because people later assumed I must have been furious. I wasn't. I was terrified. Anger came later. Terror is quieter. Terror counts traffic lights. Terror notices whether the garage door is open. Terror remembers where the spare key is hidden. When I reached the house, the front door was locked, but I still had the emergency key Hannah had given me when they bought the place. I could hear Grant before I opened the door. You make me look like a monster. Then Hannah screamed, Get away from me! I went inside. The kitchen looked like someone had thrown a dinner party and then driven a truck through it. A chair was overturned. A cabinet door hung open. A wine glass had shattered near the island. Hannah was backed against the refrigerator. Blood ran from a split in her lower lip. Grant stood between us. His face was red. He had been drinking. He turned when I entered and actually laughed. Of course. I kept my voice level. Hannah, come here. Grant stepped sideways, blocking her. This is my house. I'm not arguing with you. Then get out. Hannah. She moved. Grant grabbed her wrist. I saw her face change. That was enough. Let her go. Grant looked straight at me and squeezed harder. Or what? Don't make this worse. You've been waiting for this, haven't you? His voice rose. You never thought I was good enough for her. Let go. You think you're some kind of hero because you can fix a deck? He shoved Hannah aside and came toward me. I took one step back. Police are coming. Good. He spread his arms. They can watch me throw you out. He put both hands against my chest and shoved. Hard. At 64, I was not interested in finding out whether my balance was as good as it had been at 40. I had coached wrestling at the high school for nearly 20 years, and sometimes old habits are less about strength than knowing where somebody's weight is going. When Grant lunged again, I turned, caught his arm, and used his momentum. He went down hard enough to surprise both of us. I followed him to the floor, kept one knee beside his hip, and held his wrist so he couldn't swing at me or Hannah. Get off me, he screamed. Stop moving. You attacked me. Stop moving. Hannah was crying behind me. Dad, go outside, honey. I'm not leaving you. Then stand by the door. Grant tried to roll. I tightened my grip just enough to stop him. You think this makes you tough? He spat. I looked down at him. No. Police lights flashed across the wall. I think it makes her safe for the next 30 seconds. When the officers entered, I released Grant immediately and raised my hands. He started shouting before anyone even asked a question. He broke into my house. He assaulted me. He's obsessed with my wife. One officer looked at Hannah, her lip, her wrist, the broken glass. Ma'am, are you injured? Hannah stared at Grant. I could see the old instinct telling her to protect him. Then she looked at me. Yes, she whispered. Grant stopped shouting. Hannah took a breath. He did this. 3 words. That was all. But those 3 words changed her life. Grant was taken away that night. Hannah came home with me wearing borrowed hospital socks because nobody could find her shoes. At 2:30 inches the morning, she sat at my kitchen table wrapped in one of Laura's old blankets. She looked 35 and 7 years old at the same time. I made tea she didn't drink. For 20 minutes, neither of us spoke. Then Hannah said, I'm sorry. I felt something break inside me. For what? You warned me. No. I should have listened. No. I married him. Hannah. I stayed. I reached across the table. Look at me. She did. The person who hurts you owns the shame, not you. Her face crumpled. Everyone is going to know. Then they know. They'll think I'm stupid. Then they're stupid. A tiny laugh escaped through her tears. Dad. I mean it. She looked down. I kept thinking if I could make the house calmer, he'd calm down. I know. I stopped arguing. I stopped seeing people he didn't like. I stopped posting things online because he said I embarrassed him. I changed how I dressed. I changed my job schedule. I stopped drinking wine because he accused me of flirting when I drank. I did everything. I know. And it got worse. Because it was never about what you were doing. She looked at me. Then what was it about? Control. She stared into the untouched tea. I don't know who I am anymore. That sentence hurt more than seeing the blood on her lip. Bruises heal. Losing yourself takes longer. I walked her upstairs to the room I had prepared months earlier. When she saw the new mattress, clean towels, and key on the dresser, she stopped in the doorway. You knew. I was afraid. How long? Long enough. She began crying again. Why didn't you make me leave? Because I needed this room to be your choice. She turned and hugged me so hard my glasses came crooked. I thought you were disappointed in me. I closed my eyes. Never. That was a lie. Not because I was disappointed in her, because I was disappointed in myself. I had seen pieces and waited. I had mistaken respecting her choices for staying too far away. But I wasn't going to hand her my guilt when she already had too much of her own. The next morning, the family campaign began. Susan called at 7:14. I didn't answer. She called again at 7:17. Then came the text. Daniel, before this gets any uglier, please remember there are 2 sides to every marriage. At 7:23, Grant has a career and reputation to think about. At 7:31, Hannah was drinking too. Emotions were high. Hannah hadn't been drinking. At 7:45, we love her like a daughter. We just want everyone to calm down. At 8:02, please don't encourage her to make permanent decisions based on one night. One night. I stared at those words until they blurred. Then Janet called. I heard. Did you? Susan is devastated. Interesting choice of person to lead with. Daniel, don't do this. Do what? Turn everything into sides. Grant hit Hannah. Susan says he grabbed her and things escalated when you arrived. I looked toward the ceiling. Hannah was sleeping upstairs. She had blood coming out of her mouth. Janet sighed. I'm not defending him. People almost always say that immediately before defending someone. But divorce is a huge decision. They've been together 7 years. So maybe counseling. Stop. Janet went quiet. Do not ask my daughter to sit in a room and repair a relationship with a man she is afraid of. Daniel, you're emotional. Yes, that's why I'm saying everybody needs time. Hannah gets all the time she wants. Grant gets distance. Janet became irritated. You don't get to decide that. Correct. I looked toward the stairs. She does. I hung up. By lunchtime, relatives I hadn't spoken to in months were texting, thinking of everyone, praying for healing, hope the truth comes out. That last one came from a cousin who had once asked me to drive 3 hours to help install his kitchen cabinets for free. Nobody wrote, "Is Hannah safe?" Not one of them. That told me more about our family than anything else could have. Then the social media posts started. Susan posted a photograph of Grant as a child holding a puppy. Her caption said, "A mother knows her son's heart even when the world decides to judge him by his worst moment." Hundreds of hearts appeared underneath. People commented, "Stay strong. Family first. God knows the truth." Chase shared a quote, "Be careful who you let rewrite your story." Grant's cousin posted something about toxic in-laws. Hannah saw all of it. I knew because I found her sitting on the back steps staring at her phone. "Give me that," I said. She looked up. "What?" "Your phone, Dad?" "I'm not confiscating it. I'm blocking Facebook for today." She laughed weakly. "You don't know how. I taught teenagers for 31 years. I can defeat Facebook." She handed it over. Then she whispered, "They all hate me." "They don't hate you. They think I ruined him. They think keeping their version of the family intact is more important than what happened to you." She wiped her eyes. "Is that better?" "No." I sat beside her. "But it means this isn't about your worth." For the next month, Hannah lived with me. Healing looked nothing like the movies. There was no inspiring montage. Some days she woke early, showered, went to work, and came home laughing about something a coworker had said. Other days, the sound of a truck door slamming made her freeze. She changed the lock on her phone 3 times. She woke from nightmares. She apologized every time she left a glass in the sink. The first time she spilled coffee on my kitchen counter, she immediately grabbed paper towels and said, I'm sorry, I'll clean it." I said, "Hannah, it's coffee." She stopped. I watched her realize she had been expecting punishment. That nearly destroyed me. I left the stain there for the rest of the morning. I wanted her to see that nothing terrible happened. Slowly, she began telling me more. Grant had punched walls. He had taken her car keys during arguments. He checked her phone. He criticized the way she laughed with male coworkers. He told her that after 35, nobody else would want a divorced woman with baggage. He threatened to tell people she was unstable. He had once grabbed her jaw and forced her to look at him while he spoke. He never had to say, "I am training you to fear me." Her nervous system learned the lesson anyway. The hardest confession came one rainy afternoon. "I almost left last Christmas." "What happened?" "I packed a bag." "And?" Susan came over. I felt my jaw tighten. "Grant called her?" Hannah nodded. "She sat with me for 2 hours. She told me marriage had seasons. She said Grant's father used to have a temper too. She told me strong women don't abandon men during their lowest moments." Jesus. Then she asked me how I would feel if Grant lost everything because I couldn't forgive him. I stared out the window. She knew. Yes. How much? Enough. That was when my anger finally changed shape. Until then, Grant had been the center of it. Now I understood the system around him. Susan knew. Robert suspected. Chase had seen him humiliate Hannah. Janet had seen bruises and chosen comfort. Melissa had excluded Hannah from her wedding rather than inconvenience Grant. This wasn't one cruel man operating in darkness. There had been porch lights everywhere. People had simply turned their chairs away. 6 weeks after the assault, Janet invited us to Sunday dinner. I said no. Then she called Hannah directly. "Your aunt says everybody just wants to move forward," Hannah told me. "Do you want to go?" She looked surprised. "You're not going to tell me not to?" "No." "What do you think I should do?" "I think you spent years being told what to do. I'm not volunteering for the next shift." That made her smile. Eventually, she decided to go because she wanted to see our grandmother's sister, Aunt Rose, who was 82 and rarely left home. I offered to drive. Janet's dining room looked exactly as it had every Thanksgiving for 20 years. Same oak table, same ceramic rooster Laura used to hate, same framed school pictures climbing the staircase. But the air changed when Hannah walked in. Conversations dipped for half a second. Then everyone became aggressively cheerful. "Look who's here. You look wonderful." "We've missed you." Nobody mentioned Grant. For 40 minutes, I thought maybe they had learned something. Then dessert came. Janet placed an apple pie in the center of the table and said, "I think we need to talk about Thanksgiving." I looked at Hannah. She stiffened. Janet continued. Susan reached out to me. Of course she had. Grant may be attending their family Thanksgiving, obviously, and this whole situation has divided everyone. I thought maybe we could agree to keep holidays separate this year. Hannah's voice was quiet. Separate how? Janet glanced around the table. Well, Grant has known the family for years. People care about both of you. He isn't part of our family, I said. Janet frowned. Daniel. He married Hannah. If they're separating, why would he be at our Thanksgiving? Because Susan and I have become close. There it was. Then have Thanksgiving with Susan. Janet looked offended. That's not fair, Hannah asked. Are you asking me not to come? No, sweetheart. Nobody is saying that. Then what are you saying? Janet exhaled. I'm saying if Grant comes for dessert, maybe you could leave before then. The room went completely silent. Hannah stared at her aunt. You want me to leave Thanksgiving so the man who hit me can have dessert with my family? When you say it like that, how should she say it? I asked. Janet's husband looked down at his plate. A cousin suddenly became fascinated by his coffee. Janet's face reddened. Grant has been part of this family for 7 years. Hannah stood up. Her hands shook, but her voice didn't. So have I. Actually, I've been part of it for 35. Hannah, sit down. No. She looked around the table. I kept protecting everyone from how bad my marriage was, because I was embarrassed. Then when the truth came out, I thought at least my family would stop asking me to protect him. Nobody spoke. Tears filled her eyes, but she kept going. Apparently I was wrong. Janet stood. That is not what this is. Then what is it? We're trying to avoid drama. Hannah laughed once. It wasn't happy. He split my lip, Aunt Janet. I'm not the drama. That sentence changed the room. Aunt Rose, who had barely spoken all afternoon, put down her fork. She's right. Janet turned. Rose, please. No. The old woman looked around at all of us. I spent 22 years married to a man who threw things when he was angry. Everyone went still. None of us knew that. People told me not to embarrass the family then, too. Her eyes moved to Hannah. I wish somebody had told me I was allowed to leave. Hannah began crying. Aunt Rose reached for her hand. You're allowed. That was the only permission Hannah needed that day. We left before dessert. On the drive home, she stared out the passenger window for a long time. Then she said, I don't think I want to go back there for a while. Okay. You're not going to tell me family is family? No. She looked at me. Why? I kept my eyes on the road. Because sometimes family is just the word people use when they want access to you without accountability. She was quiet. Mom would have loved that sentence. Your mother probably said it first and I forgot. By November, Hannah had found a small apartment above a bakery in Sewickley. It wasn't impressive by Grant standards. The kitchen was narrow. The bathroom tile was probably older than she was. The bedroom window looked over an alley where delivery trucks arrived at 5 every morning. She loved it. On move-in day, I carried boxes while Hannah arranged 3 plants on the windowsill. At one point, she stood in the middle of the living room and said, Listen. To what, exactly? No yelling, no footsteps she had to identify. No garage door making her stomach tighten. Just the hum of the refrigerator and somebody laughing on the sidewalk below. She smiled. It's quiet. That Thanksgiving, we didn't go to Janet's. We didn't go to Susan's, obviously. We didn't post vague quotes or announce that we were choosing peace. We simply cooked. Hannah came over at 8 in the morning wearing Laura's old apron. Aunt Rose joined us. My neighbor Carl came because his children lived in Arizona. One of Hannah's coworkers stopped by after her hospital shift. We burned the first batch of rolls. I put too much pepper in the mashed potatoes. Hannah cracked the pecan pie exactly the way she always did. Nobody criticized her plate. Nobody corrected her story. Nobody asked her to leave before dessert. Halfway through dinner, Hannah looked around my little dining room and started crying. Carl panicked. Did I say something? She laughed through the tears. No, I knew what it was. Safety can feel overwhelming when you haven't had it for a long time. December brought the usual Christmas cards. Susan sent one. On the front was a professional photograph of the Whitmore family in matching cream sweaters. Grant wasn't in it. Inside, Susan had written, We pray 2026 brings forgiveness and reunification. Hannah read it, placed it in the recycling bin, and said, I'm not angry enough to answer. That may have been the moment I realized she was really getting better. Anger had been necessary at first. Eventually, indifference became freedom. Grant tried contacting her several times through relatives. She ignored him. Then he sent me a message. I know you hate me, but I want you to know I'm getting help. I read it twice. I didn't answer. Not because I wanted him to suffer, because his recovery was no longer our responsibility. That distinction mattered. Months earlier, I might have felt obligated to acknowledge effort, offer advice, or help carry the emotional weight. I had spent a lifetime fixing things: broken chairs, broken fences, broken lawnmowers, broken relationships. But people are not furniture. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is put down the toolbox. Winter passed. Hannah started seeing a counselor. She reconnected with old friends. She bought a bright yellow coat because Grant had once told her yellow made her look desperate for attention. She wore that coat everywhere. The first time she walked into my house wearing it, I laughed. That thing can probably be seen from space. She twirled once. Good. She joined the same running group she had belonged to before she met Grant. She started cooking again. More importantly, she started disagreeing with people again. I never knew how much I would enjoy hearing my daughter tell me I was wrong about something. One Saturday, we argued for 20 minutes about whether my garage shelves needed replacing. I finally said, "You've become very opinionated." She smiled. "You raised me." Apparently, I made a terrible mistake. In March, Melissa called Hannah and apologized for the wedding. Not the vague kind of apology people give when they want absolution without discomfort. A real one. She said, "I chose what was easiest instead of what was right." Hannah listened. She accepted the apology, but didn't immediately return to the old relationship. I was proud of that too. Forgiveness doesn't require handing someone the same access they had before. Janet took longer. She came to my house one Sunday afternoon holding a casserole, which in our family usually meant someone was sick, dead, or about to have a serious conversation. I let her in. She sat at the kitchen table for several minutes before saying, "I failed Hannah." I didn't rescue her from the sentence. "Yes," Janet looked down. I kept telling myself I was staying neutral. There wasn't a neutral position. I know. Tears appeared in her eyes. "I think I knew then too." That was harder to hear. She wiped her face. "I was scared the family would split apart." "So you asked the injured person to absorb the damage?" "Yes." We sat quietly. Finally, she said, "I'm sorry. You need to tell Hannah." "I will." "And Janet?" She looked at me. "Don't ask her to make you feel better about it." She nodded. A week later, Hannah met her for coffee. I never asked what was said. Hannah came home thoughtful and told me, "I'm not ready for things to be normal." Maybe normal wasn't that good. She smiled. That's what I told her. Spring arrived slowly. One Sunday, Hannah and I drove to the cemetery to visit Laura. We brought tulips because they were her favorite, even though she always complained they died too quickly. Hannah sat cross-legged in the grass beside the stone. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "I kept thinking Mom would be ashamed of me." "For leaving?" "For staying." I shook my head. "Your mother once drove 40 minutes back to a grocery store because the cashier forgot to charge her for a bag of apples. You think that woman was going to blame you for somebody else behaving badly?" Hannah laughed. "She really did that?" $4.12. That sounds exactly like her. I looked at Laura's name carved into the stone. She would have been furious with Grant. "I know. And then she would have made you soup." Hannah leaned against my shoulder. "I miss her." "Me too." After a minute, she whispered, "I'm glad I still had you." That sentence stayed with me. For months, people had told me I saved Hannah that night. Police officers said I arrived at the right time. Aunt Rose called me her hero. Carl told everyone at the diner that I put the son of a gun on the floor, which became more dramatic every time he retold it. But I didn't save Hannah in the way people imagined. Getting Grant off her that night was the easy part. The harder rescue happened afterward. It happened when she said no to Thanksgiving, when she signed the lease on a tiny apartment, when she wore yellow, when she stopped explaining herself, when she let relatives be disappointed, when she realized being misunderstood was less dangerous than being controlled. I helped hold the door open. Hannah walked through it herself. By early summer, we had a new Sunday routine. She came over around 5. Sometimes Aunt Rose joined us. Sometimes Janet did, if Hannah invited her. We grilled chicken or ordered pizza. We stopped trying to recreate the family we had before. That mattered. People romanticize reconciliation. They imagine the happy ending as everyone returning to the same table. Sometimes the happy ending is building a smaller table where nobody has to earn the right to feel safe. One evening, Hannah brought over a cardboard box filled with things from the old house that had finally been returned to her. Wedding photographs, decorative signs, a framed print that said, "Home is wherever we're together." She stared at that one for a long time. "Want me to burn it?" I asked. She laughed. "Dad, I have a fire pit." "No." She set it in the donation pile. Somebody at Goodwill might still believe it. At the bottom of the box was a photograph from their first Christmas as a married couple. Hannah looked radiant. Grant had his arm around her waist. Susan and Robert stood on either side. I was barely visible in the background carrying plates into the dining room. Hannah studied it. "You know what's weird?" "What?" "I used to think that picture proved I was happy. Pictures prove somebody pressed a button." She looked at me. "That's dark." "I'm 64. We get philosophical around bedtime." She laughed, then tore the photograph in half. Not dramatically, no speech, no tears. She simply separated herself from that image and dropped both pieces in the trash. That quiet little sound of paper tearing felt more final than anything else. A few months later, Grant sent Hannah one last letter. She asked me to sit with her while she read it. He apologized without asking to come back. He admitted he had spent years believing love meant having influence over every part of her life. He wrote that losing the marriage forced him to see how often he had confused fear with respect. Hannah folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. "Do you believe him?" she asked. "I believe he might believe himself right now." "That's not the same thing." "No." "Do you forgive him?" I thought for a moment. "I don't wake up hoping he suffers." "That's a very dad answer. It's the best I've got." She smiled. "I think I forgive him enough that I don't need anything from him anymore." That was better than anything I could have said. The following Thanksgiving, exactly 1 year after we walked away from Janet's table, Hannah hosted dinner in her apartment. There were only 6 of us. Me, Hannah, Aunt Rose, Janet, Carl, and Hannah's friend Rebecca. The table was too small, so we added a folding card table at the end. The turkey was slightly dry. Hannah forgot the cranberry sauce in the refrigerator until dessert. Janet brought sweet potatoes and, to her credit, didn't offer a single piece of unsolicited advice all evening. After dinner, we sat around drinking coffee while rain tapped against the windows. Hannah looked around at all of us and said, "Last year I thought losing my marriage meant I'd lost my family." Aunt Rose shook her head. "You just found out who was willing to act like one." Janet lowered her eyes. Hannah reached over and squeezed her hand. Not everything was repaired. Some relationships never returned to what they were. Some shouldn't. But there was honesty at that table. And I had learned honesty is worth more than harmony purchased with somebody else's silence. Later that night, after everyone left, Hannah helped me carry dishes to the sink. She nudged my shoulder. "You okay, old man?" "Who are you calling old?" "The man who made a noise standing up from the couch." "That couch is too low." "Sure." I handed her a plate. "You seem happy." She thought about it. "I think I am." "Good. Not because everything turned out the way I wanted. That usually doesn't happen." "I know." She rinsed the plate. "I think I'm happy because I finally stopped begging people to treat me like I mattered." I had to look away for a second. Laura would have been proud. Hell, I was proud enough for both of us. Before Hannah left, she stood on the porch in that ridiculous yellow coat and hugged me. "You know what I remember most about that night?" she asked. I expected her to say Grant yelling, or the police, or the kitchen floor. "What?" "When I called, you believed me." I swallowed. "Of course I did. Not everybody does." She was right. Sometimes saving somebody doesn't begin with fighting their monster. Sometimes it begins with not asking them to prove the monster exists. After she drove away, I sat alone at my kitchen table for a while. The house was quiet again, but it didn't feel empty the way it had after Laura died. It felt peaceful. There's a difference. For most of my life, I thought being a good father meant providing things: a home, college tuition, car repairs, Sunday dinners, a place to come for Christmas. Getting older taught me something harder. Sometimes love means believing someone when the truth is inconvenient. Sometimes it means disappointing relatives who prefer appearances. Sometimes it means refusing to sit at a table where the person who caused the pain is treated more gently than the person carrying it. And sometimes the strongest thing a family can do is stop calling silence peace. I don't know what became of Grant beyond what Hannah occasionally heard through other people. I hope he changed. I sincerely do. Not because I want him back in our lives, but because somebody else may eventually stand where my daughter once stood, and I hope he has learned enough never to make another person afraid in their own home. But whether he changes is his story now. Hours moved on without him. Hannah eventually stopped checking who had unfollowed her. She stopped defending why she left. She stopped explaining why she didn't attend certain family gatherings. She learned that boundaries feel cruel, mainly to people who benefited from you having none. And I learned I didn't need a huge family around my table to prove I wasn't alone. I needed the right people. People who didn't require Hannah to shrink so they could stay comfortable. People who understood that loyalty without accountability is just another word for enabling. People who knew love should make a home feel safer, not smaller. So let me leave you with the question I've asked myself more than once since that night. If keeping your family together requires the person being hurt to stay quiet, are you protecting a family at all? Or are you only protecting the people who benefit from pretending nothing is wrong?